Hello, everyone. Welcome to Chapter 18. Chapter 18 covers the obstetrics procedures that are in a section all of their own. These procedures will only be done on the products of conception, and we're going to take a closer look at them right now. Okay, and your book does a nice job of covering the guidelines for this important section in section C1, which we'll take a look at in just a second. As mentioned, these procedures are only done as what the codebook calls the products of conception. Anything that's performed on the pregnant woman and not on the products of conception are coded to the appropriate root operation in the medical and surgical section. Let's take a look at those guidelines that I want to make sure you review in C1 in your text. And again, here they are, C1 and of course C2. C1, products of conception. Procedures performed on the products of conception are coded to the obstetric section. Anything that's performed on the pregnant female other than the products of conception are coded to the appropriate root operation in the medical surgical section. Very clear. So they give us an example. An amniocentesis is coded to the products of conception body part in the obstetric section. A repair of an obstetric urethral laceration is coded to the urethra body part in the medical surgical section. And again, this can seem a little bit confusing because it's all dealing with a pregnant woman, but if you can keep that concept clear about products of conception equals OB, everything else is root operation, the medical surgical, you'll be a lot better off. C2 covers procedures following delivery or abortion. Any procedure that's performed following a delivery or an abortion, what have you, or evacuation is coded to the root operation of extraction, and the body part is products of conception. So the products of conception, what does that mean? It means any component of the pregnancy. We normally think of that as the fetus, but also includes the umbilical cord and placenta. We covered this, again, any procedure that's performed following a delivery or an abortion are coded to the obstetric section. Why? Because again, goes back to that issue of products of conception. If we have a diagnostic or therapeutic D&C performed during other times, these are coded to the medical and surgical section with the root operation of extraction. The obstetrics section begins with the number 1. The first character is 1. The second character is value 2 for pregnancy. And the third character is the root operations for those procedures that are performed on the products of conception. Let's take a quick look at those tables now. Make this a little bit bigger. And as we can see, first character is a 1, followed by a 0, right? 0 for pregnancy, right? Now we get into the third character, which is the root operation. And a lot of these are the same ones we've seen before. Change, drainage, abortion. A new one, extraction, we've seen that before. Delivery, have not seen that before, but we have seen inspection, insertion, removal, repair, and reposition. And again, we have some body parts, but things that are a little bit different. We have such things as products of conception retained, products of conception ectopic. And we have the approaches, nothing new here, open, percutaneous, endoscopic, via natural artificial opening, endoscopic, and external. We do have some devices. We have 3 for monitoring electrode, Y for other device, and then we have Z, of course, for no device. Then we have all these qualifiers. I'm not going to name them all. I'll let you read these, but these are the ones that you have to pay special attention to. And again, the root operations we've covered. It's also mentioned in table 18.3 in addition to the code book. Same material. I'm not going to take your time and look at table 18.3. I'll let you read that on your own. And the 4th character, body part involved. And again, products of conception. We always think of the fetus, embryo, also includes placenta, amnion, amniotic sac, amniotic fluid, and umbilical cord. These are listed in table 18.4 in your text. Same stuff we just took a look at in the code books. Products of conception for 0, products of conception retain, character of 1, and products of conception ectopic, character of 2. 18.5 table covers the 5th character. Again, same kind of approaches we've seen before. We took a look at it in the code books earlier. 6th character is the device. We don't think of devices all the time necessarily for obstetrics, but we do have monitoring devices, other devices, frequently no devices. Then we have the 7th character. Again, these are the qualifiers, and note some of the things that we see here that are unique to obstetrics. These include such things as high and low for the different types of cesarean deliveries, low forceps, mid forceps, high forceps, vacuum, fetal blood, amniotic fluid, nervous system, eye, ear, nose, sinus, respiratory, mouth, and throat. And that's all I have for you. Please stop by office hours or message me if you have any questions about this material. We'll see you online. Bye now.